Hello everyone, I'm Kübra Aksoy. I'm a lecturer at Hasan Kayoncu University, which is a university in the southeast part of Turkey. Today I'm gonna talk about language cognition and culture under the topic of sociolinguistic in English language teaching. Let's start with the contents of the slide. And the first content is the language, cognition and culture, language and perception, linguistic categories and culture, discourse patterns and culture, and also language, social class and language and perception. As you all know, we perceive the language, we perceive the contents of this language different from each other. Languages are distinguishable from each other in their sounds, their grammatical patterns, and their vocabulary. Also, I want to ask you the question, can language determine the way we perceive reality? We can say that yes, language can determine the way we perceive the language itself actually. We can perceive the meaning of a sentence differently or a meaning of a word differently from each other, from part to part of a country also, and also different parts of the world. The local people select the appropriate variety for any particular interaction according to similar social factors to those identified in earlier examples. Who they are talking to, in what kind of settings, and for what purposes. Like I told before, the local people in a place, in a country, or in a city of a country can determine the meaning of this language according to the factors. Let's say who they are talking to, in what kind of setting, and for what purposes, according to the purpose of the speech. It can illustrate the range of linguistic variation which can be observed in different speech communities. Different speech communities can illustrate the range of linguistic variation, and it can be observed differently in different parts of the world. Verbal hygiene is the thought-provoking term to describe how people respond to the urge to intervene in matters of language. And in the last part, is there a close relationship between language and thought? How does language influence the way we perceive others? And for instance, a relationship between the language, society, and attitudes, perceptions, how can they affect and how do we perceive others according to their language, their society, their attitudes while they're talking? And in the last part, in the next part, vocabulary and cognition. We have terms like linguistic determinism and linguistic relativity. People from different cultures think differently because of the differences in their languages, according to linguistic determinism. A language determines certain non-linguistic cognitive processes. But in linguistic relativity, language influences perceptions, thought, and at least potentially behavior. And languages differ and conclude that the thought patterns of their speakers also differ. In linguistic relativity, language influences perceptions. In linguistic determinism, people from different cultures think differently because of the is Worf right? It should be difficult to identify colors which your language doesn't have a name for. For example, yellow. In your language, yellow has a meaning, yes, but in the other language, Yellow may not have any meaning according to your language. But although the Dani and New Guinea tribe use only two color terms, in this Dani tribe, they use just two color terms corresponding to black and white, or more accurately, dark and light. It was found that they could recognize and distinguish between subtle shades of colors that their language had no names for example, pale blue, turquoise, and this suggests that the strong form of the hypothesis can't be maintained. Some languages have linguistic categories which take account of the shape of objects, the form of navajo verbs. For example, it's sometimes determined by the shape of the objects, long or short, thin or thick, round or not, and so on. Not surprisingly, Navajo-speaking children are typically much faster than English-speaking children in categorizing blocks by shape, and given a choice of ways of putting objects into groups, Navajo children tend to group them according to shape, while English-speaking children group them according to color. Because of the differences in languages and also perceptions of people in their languages according to the colors in their language. These interesting findings based on experiments with colors and shapes all support the weaker principle of linguistic relativity. The categories provided by a language may make it easier to draw certain conceptual distinctions. Let's see the meaning of linguistic relativity in this chart. What is the likely form of the name of number 16 in French, Chinese, and Japanese? Let's have a look. In English, one, while in French, un, while in Chinese, yi, and in Japanese, ichi. How do you know? And what are the implications of your answers for learners of the Chinese word for 11, shi, is literally 10 and for 20, the Chinese word is ershi, literally 210. Consequently, learning to count beyond 10 is easy for Chinese-speaking children than for English-speaking children because the meanings are translated directly actually, and they encode the time according to languages, cross-language, and cross-culture. And grammar and cognition. We have grammatical categories such as tense, aspects, and gender encode aspects of reality differently in different languages. Hopi conception of time is fundamentally different from that of Western cultures. Hopi is another tribe, like Worf, according to Worf, concluded that the Hopi think in terms of cycles of events and sets of processes rather than units of time. Actually, according to Worf, Hopi culture processed the language according to units of time, while in Western cultures, they just concept and encode the meanings according to not the cycle of events, but the cycle of processes. Yeah. And speakers of different languages and cultures filter or cut up reality. It is widely accepted that certain concepts may be more quotable or easier to express in some languages than in others. Like I have given the example of colors. It is accepted that some concepts, some situations are more quotable or easier to express according to some languages, but in others it may not be. Grammaticalized or grammaticized when it functions less and less like an independent lexical item and more like an element in the grammatical system, such as an affix or auxiliary verb, and Third, communities with little technological development employ the fewest color terms, while their pronoun noun classification systems are often much more complex than those of European languages. Yeah. Um, let's skip this one. Yeah. In the other part, linguistic categories and culture. Simple societies cannot have complex grammars. They just have the basic grammar structures, grammar patterns, and they use to convey the meaning, convey or express their opinions. Kwaikud, a Native American language, for example, requires the grammatical classifications of nouns based on whether they are visible or not. They just classifies them according to their visibility. But in French, every noun is assigned to one of two genders. You have to express a word according to their genders. Or if you are using affix, you have to use them according to. Or if you want to just make up a word, you have to use this gender items in these languages. And the verbal by human males, some animals, and in this language, non-flesh food, everything else is used according to some addings to a language. Fish are in class 1 because they are animate fish in class 1. Let's see. And fishing implements are also in class 1 because they are associated with fish. It means that a root of a word or with addings are associated if it is associated with the same meaning or the same noun, they are categorized according to it. Sun and stars are in the same class as fire. Let's see. And the moon is a male and husband of the sun, which is female. Hence, the moon is in class 1 with men. So, they are categorized according to their gender. If it is thought like it is a man, it is categorized differently from the other one. Birds are believed to be the separates of that human females, and hence they are also in class 2. Yeah, because it is a human and a separates of a female, so it is categorized in the second part. So, less tangible concepts such as kinship further illustrate the complexities of the relationship between language and culture. In a culture Maori, relative age is very, very important. Even the status of the tribe or iwi to which you belong will be identified in Teina and Tuakana terms relative to other tribes. So, according to the tribe that you belong to, you can be categorized culture. And in the other part, I want to talk about the language laws. As the languages disappear, the information is harder to retain and it gradually disappears too. Language loss also entails the loss of insights about human perception and the meanings and the conveying of a meaning. Other important reasons for deploring languages loss is the fact that when people lose their language, their distinctive socio-cultural identity is also put at risk because uh, if a language exists, um, actually a human being exists. So they are nearly the same thing. People whose language has been swamped by another often lose confidence in their abilities and develop poor self-esteem. If you don't have any culture, if you don't have any language that you belong to, it means that you may lose your confidence, you may lose your confidence in your ability, and also you can develop poor self-esteem. But if you are belong to a language community, and if you are belong to a tribe or any category, it means that you can develop your self-esteem according to your ability and your community. And Aboriginal interaction give personal relationship priority over information-oriented goals, and they prioritize the affective over the referential dimensions. Long, non-intrusive silences are tolerated in this Aboriginal tribe, and even when one party is clearly gathering information, it is tolerated if you are silent, it means. Preferred discourse patterns and linguistic usages not only reflect but also shape or construct a particular view of social reality and sociocultural. And this is the same thing, and I wrote under the category of exercise 13. And I have tried to find some exercises according to the topics that I have mentioned. And you can read those statements and the text as an example of the pre-mentioned item. Language, social class, and cognition. Middle-class children do well in school. Working-class children don't do well in school. And middle-class children speak a different variety of English than working-class children. And usual conclusion, working-class children should change the way they speak or vice versa. Restricted code might also constrain that the cognitive abilities of those who use it. The language which children use might affect what they were capable of perceiving and even their thinking abilities. It means that social classes, if you are in mid-social class in your community, and if you are using wide range of vocabulary according to your environment and your family, your school time, it determines the quality of your conversation, and also it determines the value you give to a language. And that was all I want to talk about the sociolinguistic in English language teaching. And if you are wondering about any topic, or if you want to ask me a question, or just email me, and you can reach via LinkedIn from this link. Thank you very much for listening to me, and see you soon.